In the old days, we often had large calendars hanging on office walls that everyone could look at to see who was doing what and where. Those worked when everything was done from a central office and everybody could see the wall. But these days, people and offices are scattered in any variety of locations, not only within a building, but sometimes around the globe. So the ability to look at a wall calendar just isn't practical anymore. So we've gone to electronic calendars, where we can add and update things in the blink of an eye, or maybe better said, with the click or tap of a finger. But we still need to be able to share our calendars, whether it's so an assistant or colleague can schedule something for us, or so we can see where our children or significant others are during the day. If we have exchange-based accounts, sharing is a little easier than if we're using POP3 or IMAP accounts. But with any of them, sharing is available through a variety of options. Let's start by remembering that with Exchange calendars, everyone's free busy time is always available to all other users. Now, free busy only shows if a person is in the office, busy, or out of the office, nothing more. Sharing a calendar actually gives people more information than just the free busy data. Outlook 2013 provides many ways to share. It's so important that there's actually a share group on the ribbon. We happen to be in the calendar, but if we look over at the far right side of the ribbon, we can see this share group and all of the different options. In this case, emailing a calendar, sharing a calendar, publishing online, and also working with calendar permissions. Let's start with the easy one first. That would be to email a calendar. When we click or tap this option, an email, of course, is generated. We would normally address the email, possibly put in a subject, and a short message. But before we even get there, we have to address the small window that appears when we do this. It's called Send a Calendar via Email. First, it needs to designate which calendar, if we have more than one, we want to share. This is going to be static information. It's not something that will instantly be updated, but sometimes a static copy is better than nothing. So select the appropriate calendar first. Then we can choose a date range. For example, we may want to send information for the next 30 days. It actually tells us what dates those will be in case we need a little help figuring that out. Then we get to determine what detail should be sent. Should it be available only, basically the free busy time? Or do we want to show limited details, including the availability and subjects of calendar items, or the full details with everything that we may possibly have entered into our calendar items? There are also some advanced options. We can click or tap the Show option to expand that out. And that includes whether we want people to see things marked as private. Now remember, every item in Outlook has a private option available on the ribbon. It looks like a little padlock. If things are marked as private, generally that means they will not be shared with others. But if we were sending this to a spouse or a family member, or somebody that we really trust, we could choose to include those private details. We can also choose if we want to include any attachments. We also can say what we want the email layout to be. By default, it's a daily schedule, or we can simply do a list of events. When we get these things configured, then we simply click or tap OK, and then continue to go ahead and configure the email as we want it, with things like the subject and a message. Here we can see that in the body of the email, it actually shows the calendar. It has clickable hyperlinks for any day that we have something scheduled. And then if we continue to move down, it does actually show us day by day anything that's scheduled. What this does is it gives the person the ability to read the schedule simply like any other email. But if they happen to use Outlook, they just aren't connected to us, they do also get an attachment, and they can drag this attachment onto their own calendar and get a calendar version. It really works very well. We're not going to actually send this email, so we'll go to the upper right corner and simply close out of it and choose to not save the changes. Another way that we can share our calendar, especially with those outside of our organization, is to choose the Publish Online option. Unlike simply emailing a static copy, this allows us to update the published information. So as we update our calendar on a fairly regular basis, the published calendar will update as well. That way, everybody stays up to date and we don't have to send multiple emails. This feature actually uses Microsoft servers as a default, but can also be configured to use internal servers if our IT people have configured it to do so. Otherwise, the Microsoft servers are free and reliable. We would simply choose to use this option, publish the calendar, and it's going to take us through a variety of steps. We'll need to log on to a Microsoft account, and go through the basic same configuration options that we did before, as far as what do we want to publish, how much information should we publish, and so forth. Since the options are basically the same, except now they're web-based, we're not going to take the time to go through this particular configuration. But know that it does walk you through a wizard and is very safe, secure, and best of all, it's free. We'll go ahead and close out of the browser and move back into Outlook. Another option that we have from the Share group on the Home tab is to actually share calendars. When we click or tap this option, it does create an email, but this is different from just emailing a calendar. This is more like a light version of the old delegate option. It does create an email, but this is going to be interactive. What we're going to do is actually invite somebody within our organization to view our email. You can see that it says sharing invitation. We then have the option to both allow the recipient to view our own calendar and possibly to even request that they share theirs with us. We can then choose the same levels that we've seen before of availability, limited details, or full details. And of course, because this is an email, we could add any type of message that we wanted at the bottom. This does not carry all of the options that we had with delegates, but it is a very fast and very simple way to share our calendar quickly with those who work within our organization. We're going to go ahead and close this out, not save the changes, and go into our own email. Because here we have a sharing request that was sent in the same way from Susan to Michael. When we click, we see that it is a sharing request. She has also requested not only that she is sharing her calendar with him, but that he do the same. So he has the option at the very top to allow or deny. See what I mean? This is actually very simple. We'll go ahead and say, yes, Michael wants to share his calendar with Susan as well by clicking the Allow option. It will then open an email, and we can either add something additional or just send the acceptance on its way. It does verify the permissions that we're trying to give. In this case, it says availability only, and we'll say, yeah, that's all we want to share with Susan at the moment, so we'll say yes. Then it will come up and confirm that we have shared our calendar with the person who is designated. In this case, it's Susan. It also informs us that Susan Jensen has granted access to their calendar. So we'll say, okay. Now, how do we open another person's calendar? Well, it likewise is just as easy if we go back to the calendar itself. We're not going to go back to the Share group this time. This time we're going to go to the group just to the left, which is called Manage Calendars. And one of the options here is to open a calendar. We can open them from a variety of places, but in this case, we want to go all the way to the bottom and choose Open a Shared Calendar. Here we simply need to designate the name of the person whose calendar we want to open by clicking or tapping Name and selecting the person from any variety of our lists. In this case, it's Susan. We then click or tap OK. And anytime we have shared calendars that are open and available to us in Outlook, they show up on the left-hand side of our screen. We have our own calendars at the top below the mini calendars, and then down below should be a category called Shared Calendars, and here we can see all of the calendars, in this case, the one for Susan. When we put a check mark on the left-hand side, that displays the additional calendar. So we're now able to see our own calendar on the left and Susan's calendar on the right. This side-by-side view is certainly very useful when we want to compare calendars. But one of the things that I love that was created in the last version of Outlook is the ability to do something called a calendar overlay. What this means is we want to take them from a side-by-side view and basically lay them one over each other so we're looking at only one calendar. We can do this in a couple of ways. One is to click the left arrow on the tab for another person's calendar. Now we have a combined calendar, and we can see that we have one main tab. All of the items have been combined into one. To separate them back out, we simply click the now right-pointing arrow and put them back the way that we needed to see them. When we're done looking at more than one calendar, we can simply click the X on that particular calendar's tab in the calendar view itself. In this case, we return back to only looking at our own personal calendar. Let's say, though, that we work with Susan a lot, and we often need to see what each of us is doing to schedule maybe meetings with other people. Instead of having to constantly turn calendars on and off, another feature we can use is called the Group Calendar. It's found in the Manage Calendars group from the Home tab when looking at calendars. If we click or tap the option, we see the option to create a new calendar group, which is what we need to do now. If we currently had 2 or more calendars selected, we could also just say Save as New Calendar Group, and that would save us a couple steps. But we want to go through the actual steps, so we'll choose Create New Calendar Group. First of all, we need to give the group a name, and we'll just call this Marketing. It could be the name of your department, of a particular project, or anything that meets your needs. Once the name is entered, we'll click or tap OK. Now we need to select the people whose calendars we want to be included in the group. It could be as few as 2 or as many as literally hundreds. We'll go ahead and add Michael and Susan. And then we'll move to the bottom and click or tap OK. Notice that we did not need to include ourselves. By default, we are included in the group, so we currently have 3 calendars that we're seeing. That's okay for now as we're working through, but know that we can always go in and modify these group calendars as well. Just remember that all of the options are from the Calendar Groups option in the ribbon in the Manage Calendars group on the Home tab. In older versions of Outlook, we would actually go back up to this option at that time in the menu and toolbar in order to view the particular calendars. But in the newer versions of Outlook, we actually go to the left-hand side of our screen. We can now see that the calendar group that we created is listed, called Marketing. We can turn this group completely on or off by simply using the check mark. We can turn it off. We can turn it back on. But we also have the ability to work with the individual calendars. For example, we could turn off the Michael Brooks calendar. And if we right-click on Michael Brooks, we could even delete that calendar from the group. So this gives us an easy way to not only access the individual calendars, but also the group as a whole. And it can be expanded, collapsed, and turned on or off, just like any other calendars that we may be using in Outlook. What most people are expecting, though, if they've used this feature before, is that when they enable the group, that it's going to show up differently than just the standard calendar. This also is functionality that has changed. What we now have, if we want to see something different than a typical calendar view, is something called the Schedule view. This is more of a horizontal type of calendar, where we see free busy time. And if we have a lot of people that are part of a group or a project or department, this is often what we're trying to do. It's very similar to the view that we see when we're using the scheduling assistant for a meeting. We simply want to see when people are free, busy, and out of the office. And that's what the Schedule view is for. It can be used without group schedules or with the group schedule to get the more traditional view that you may be used to. We'll go ahead and just put that back to the monthly view, and we'll go ahead and close out Susan's calendar. So we have a lot of options so far, but there is one more option, and it's the very last option in the Share group. It's called Calendar Permissions. If we want the highest possible level of control over sharing our information and having other people possibly working with our information, that's when we want to choose the Calendar Permissions option. This is the equivalent of the old delegates that we used to have. We can get to it the way that we just did, or by right-clicking on a folder and choosing Properties and selecting the Permissions tab. By default, we can see that Susan already has some permissions because she sent a sharing request and we gave her permissions to do so. We can either add people or remove people or simply change the properties. By selecting Susan, instead of giving her just custom properties, we're going to go ahead and change those. For example, we're going to say that she can not only read our free busy time, but she can see the full details. We can also give her the ability to create items in our calendar, but maybe not create any subfolders, edit her own items, or edit any of the things that are already on the calendar. We can also control whether they can delete items, and in this case, we're not going to give her any permissions there. And we could technically make Susan a folder owner, which gives her full control over everything. That would be perfect if she were an admin. This is where we get into a lot of the full details, the nitty-gritty, if you will, of what people can and can't do with any of the folders that we're sharing on Outlook. We would simply go ahead and click Apply. To update those properties, we could then add, remove, and manage other people. And when we're finished, we could simply say, OK. Sharing information is something most of us want to do at some time or another, whether it's with our spouse, children, friends, family, colleagues, or even potential clients and vendors. The amount of control that they have is important, as well as what level of information they can see. Having easy ways to share information, though, without retyping or having to go through complex processes, is just one more way that Outlook helps us manage our time and efforts as well as our information.